The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of each guest personally and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of any employers or affiliated organizations.
Welcome to the Faded Spade Podcast with your hosts, Tom Wheaton and Sean McCormack.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Faded Spade Podcast. We are here for a special edition poker tournament reentry roundtable. This is a perspective show to talk about one of the hottest topics in the industry right now. My name is Tom Wheaton, founder and CEO of Faded Spade, here with a number of guests. And guys, I'm just going to go left to right on my screen. Matt Savage, executive tour director of the World Poker Tour, and apparently like the creator of ReEntry, right?
Well,
Or
okay.
you kind of like Al Gore created the internet, I guess.
I'll take the blame for it if I'm going to get the credit. Yeah.
Right. Jeremy Smith, tournament director of the Heartland Poker Tour. Sean McCormack, Aria Poker Room director, the Poker Boss, and multiple bullet Matt Berkey, founder, Solve for Why, high stakes poker player. What's up, everybody? How y'all doing?
Good.
I know Berkey's feeling good after a Steelers win. Sean's got that ugly Patriots hat on. It's freezing in Chicago. And Matt, those Commerce curtains are just freaking amazing.
Yes, they are.
All right, so let's jump into this, guys. I want to start off with the purpose. And the purpose here is just to provide perspective on this topic from obviously four very credible folks in the industry from different perspectives. We're going to talk about a few different topics regarding reentry, regarding freeze-outs. But I want to start, Sean, Poker Boss, with you. Could you just kind of frame up for everybody, you know, the types of reentry or types of tournaments that are out there that we're going to be talking about for folks who may not be fully aware of the topic?
Sure. Well, you know, there's three major types of tournaments, and then there's subsets off of each one. Of course, the first one being freeze-out events. Everybody's familiar with this. It's what the WSOP main does. There's other tournaments around the world that do a freeze-out. Super High Rollable is a freeze-out, and a number of other really prestigious events go with the freeze-out format. It's understandable. Then you have what some people label as a single reentry or a one extra bullet, kind of like one mulligan, where if you bust out one bullet, you can re-enter on the same day. Or if it has multiple flights, maybe sometimes you do one entry and one re-entry per day. And then, which will be the crux of our conversation here, is unlimited re-entry, where while the reg is open, anybody can bust out and go back in. And sometimes you have people that shoot 2-3 bullets. I would say that's pretty much the average. Then you have events where sometimes guys go off for 6-7 bullets. And, you know, the community's pretty mixed on that. So that's why we're here today, to kind of not solve this, but definitely open the dialogue and try to figure out if we can find a fair middle ground for what everybody wants.
There you go. All right. Well said, man. So Savage, I'm going to do Savage and Berkey, so we're not confused with Matt and Matt. So, you know, obviously with your history and your leadership from a tournament standpoint, especially with the TDA and really opening up reentry a number of years ago, can you kind of walk us through some of the history and how it played out?
Yeah, so in 2010, I came up with the idea of having a small buy-in for a big guarantee. And what we did that year, it was a 335 event where there was $1 million guarantee. And the goal of that event was not to generate rake, like a lot of people feel like reentry was created to generate rake. That was never the case. It was to bring people into the casino. Tournaments were created to bring people into the casino so they would play cash games and do other things at your property. They were never created for rake generation. I mean, I can't think of a single place that just runs tournament only that is profitable, because I don't think tournaments are profitable. I've said this before. I think Sean would agree with me that the reason we run these is to bring people into our casinos, bring the people into our card rooms. So that year we had a tournament that had a 335 buy, $1 million guarantee. And the way it was, and this is a fourth set of reentry events, is you could reenter one day. You can play one day, and then if you bust it out, you can come back the next day and reenter into the same tournament. And that's the way it started back in 2010, and that's the way I intended it to be. And it kind of morphed into this, you can re-enter the same heat and multiple day flights and all of these things. And Now it's just, in my opinion, got way out of hand.
Got it. All right. So Jeremy, hearing that from a Heartland Poker Tour perspective, do you remember during that time or a little bit after how it affected your tour and some of the decisions you made?
I've been with HPT for about 6 years now.
Yeah.
So the whole time I've been with HPT, we've done ReEntry, but just being in tournaments and poker scene for a while now, it just created this, I don't want to say monster from the very beginning, but, players were just, when it was originally introduced, firing quite a few times. I think it's kind of calmed down a little bit. I guess it just depends on the buy-in, but we do ReEntry in all of our events, unlimited ReEntry, especially the first one, opening weekend. But the main event, our championship event, we do a +1 per flight. So we kind of tone it down a little bit for the $2,500 championship event. So I'm a fan, of trying the at least +1 in all of them, or, just to kind of tone it down a little bit. Will it affect how many players come into the casino, or will it bring in more, people? Who knows?
Okay. And then Berkey, obviously you've been in the game for 15 plus years, right? So you were playing before this whole movement, we can call it, and after. So player perspective, like how did that affect your choice of tournaments, if at all?
I mean, it impacts you a little bit when you're traveling, but I think Savage kind of hit it on the head. There's a hard divide. And this also has to do with the community and the game evolving as well. But there's a hard divide between pre-ReEntry and how much cash games were flourishing as a byproduct of tournaments being in a place versus post-ReEntry, where now, you don't travel to play an event and then play side games whenever you bust. You travel to play a series and then you move on to the next one. So I think that it's strange for me to hear that tournaments aren't profitable because so many tours are cropping up and there's just so much available to the low stake player, the mid stake player, even now getting to the point of the high roller tours, that cash is really dying. And if that's the bread and butter of card rooms, then I fear that they'll go by the wayside next.
Yeah, really good point. I didn't even think about that. So let's talk about that topic for a minute. Sean, you mentioned this a couple times, right? Where you mentioned like the difference of past and present in terms of players playing a tournament and then playing cash versus bouncing out of the casino and going to play a tournament elsewhere, right? So when you think about like unlimited ReEntry, and let's stay on unlimited ReEntry here for a minute, is that part of the reason why poker rooms are moving towards that more, just to keep people in the casino versus leaving? Like, how does that factor into it based on Berkey's assessment of cash games versus tournaments?
So I would say that, I've been saying this for years, and I can't even count how many times on Twitter, social media I've said this, but it's not one size fits all. That's the biggest issue we have. Obviously, I'm in the Vegas market, so we don't want someone, even in a daily 140 tournament, 240, whatever we're running, we don't want a player to bust and then be like, oh, I'm a tournament player. Berkey kind of just alluded to that players used to be both. Hell, players were tournament cash and then the pit if need be. And it's just players aren't that way anymore. Players are like strictly tournaments or strictly cash. And there's a minority in the middle that do both. And the majority that do both are very recreational players. So it's really hard in the Vegas market to say, okay, we're going to do a freeze out for just like a daily event. And then I have to lose that customer to a competitor because I don't have an option for that tournament player to re-enter at, if they take a beat with aces or kings or something like that, and they're just frustrated, they just leave. Yeah. So, and Matt Savage has talked about this before. It's like, we've opened this box, like this Pandora's box of unlimited ReEntry, and we don't know how to stuff it back in because there's so many things that came along with unlimited ReEntry, and it's not just the availability to play. These monster deep stack events would have to be reduced. Do we have players that can go back to the 2003, 2004 days where you bought into a $1,500 event and you got $1,500 in chips and it was chip for chip? Can players go back to that? I'm doubtful on that. We have these monster guarantees. How do we hit them without unlimited ReEntry? We can't. The business would have to scale it back. And I do agree with Matt that tournaments, I won't say they're a net loser, of course, but they're like advertising. They're just to draw people in, and we hope they do other things. I can speak on, I can't give specific numbers, but I could speak on my room alone. Tournaments account for less than 15% of our total nut. Like, seriously, like that's, and I run high rollers. I run high rollers with unlimited reentry, with rake. That's higher than your normal average tournament. So who else is running outside of like Commerce that runs these massive series? Who else can get a huge foothold of just like money coming in for rake in tournaments?
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. Your smaller card rooms are hoping that you do other things, because the majority of card rooms, they're break even or a slight win on tournaments. There's just not enough money there to take out of the rake. You know, if you go too far, people complain about it. So yeah. I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I'm hoping we can find that middle ground.
So you mentioned a couple of things there, and you mentioned that the minority are folks that play cash games and tournaments and partly recreational players, right? I fall in that category. Part-time cash game player, part-time tournament player. I'll go play the mid-stakes poker tournaments, dabble in the high stakes when I can. But if I bust, I'm playing cash afterwards, right? And I know that's the minority. And my decisions as a recreational part-time player are heavily weighted on reentry, right? So when I played the 10K ARIA, WPT ARIA Classic, I played it instead of other ones because it was single reentry, not multi-reentry for my bankroll, part-time recreational. When I play Heartland Poker Tour, right, I'll fire 2 or 3 bullets because it works with the bankroll. And I feel like because of Solve for Why poker training, there's a slight edge, you know, from a tournament perspective. But again, I think that's a good point, the difference between high stakes players and their mindsets and part-time recreationals. So I want to go back to something else you said about Commerce, right? And not every poker room is like the Commerce in terms of demand and whatnot. So Matt, I know you just tried a whole new format at the Commerce. So can you kind of share what you tried, why, and what some of the feedback and results have been?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of it right now. We're doing a series right now, basically back to what we did in 2010. If you bust out, you cannot re-enter the same heat. You can actually enter an additional heat if we have one, but most of our events are one-day events, and there is no re-entry. So what we're finding is that players are playing the event. If they bust out, they're going to stick around and probably play cash or play a single table satellite, because we've got those going again. Those things have disappeared because of reentry, and it's working in the fact that, like, on Saturday night we had 130 cash games downstairs, and we can track that those players that are here that are playing in these events, we had a noon flight and then we had a 5 o'clock flight. So the players that busted out of the noon flight, what are they going to do if they want to stick around and play the 5 o'clock flight? They're going to go down and play downstairs. They're going to play cash games. And I think we're seeing a bump because of that. And I think that is one of the reasons why the Commerce has decided to back this and try and go with more no reentry events. And we're just kind of testing it out here because we have our monster, the LA Poker Classic, just around the corner. So we're seeing how it's working out. We have the numbers to track, and we'll see and see how it goes. And, you know, to be fair, the Commerce is a card room. We don't have slot machines. We don't have, you know, major restaurants and things like that where people will go and spend their money if they have to come back at a later time. So those things, I think, are important to not only us as tournament people, but also our bosses. You know, they want to see what kind of effect this has as well.
Okay. So Berkey, you hear that, right? As a high stakes player. And I know you fire everything from the Bellagio 5 Diamond to party poker events and et cetera. So when you see unlimited reentry, or you see single reentry, or you see freeze out, do you make your decisions based on that factor? And how do you kind of calculate your ROI and potential, like, as a player for unlimited reentry?
I mean, for the player standpoint, all that we are ever going to be estimating is the value of the event.
Okay.
And it being reentry doesn't necessarily by default make it more valuable. It just gives you more of an opportunity to see a return. So there are 2 ways of looking at it, and I think both need to be considered at any given time. Every single individual bullet is effectively a new buy-in. So with re-entry, we get to put in more volume, but there's a cost that comes with that. The collective bullets that you put into any given event are obviously going to lessen the ceiling on your ROI. But these live events are so big that that's kind of okay. Like, if you fire 10 times into the Colossus, but the return on those 10 bullets are still like 500% if you win, it's well worth it. Like that's just astronomical. I think where it becomes a little bit, I don't want to say unfair or, I don't really even know how to qualify, because I don't think that any edge is like gained by, like, people have this concept that, you know, you can gain a huge edge by having deeper pockets than somebody else. That's kind of silly. That just gives you the ability to fire an event more often. But in these very small fields, like high rollers, particularly where late registration goes very long, it is advantageous to be able to buy in for that whatever number of times when maybe a third of the field has busted. So effectively, the value of that stack will probably be worth slightly more than what you're paying, just because so much of the field has been eliminated.
That is another huge factor. I want to bring this up. Late registration also, in my opinion, has gotten out of hand. You know, I wear different hats. I'm the executive tour director of the World Poker Tour. And to be honest, it is our partner's decision on what they want to do for reentry. We don't, force them to have a certain, qualification of freeze out, of single reentry, of multiple reentry. They can do what they want. The one thing that we do ask is that we have a certain amount of time of registration. I like to keep it at least 25 big blinds or more when they're going to come in as a buy-in, but I still think that that's problematic as well. So how long registration is open, I feel like it does favor the pros if registration is open too long.
Yeah, I think this is more of the crux of the problem that needs to be solved than reentry. I understand that you don't want to face Justin Bonomo 6 times in an event if you keep knocking him out. But if we were more restrictive in the amount of time that people have to get back in, I think that it kind of solves the problem itself. Like, late reg is so long now that people are trying to game the system. There are people developing, calculations as to what's a stack worth if I drop it at max late reg versus if I buy in the first rounds. And, we still haven't evolved. A lot of events still run anti-free poker because they think that's what the recs want, despite the fact that 99.9% of the event will have antis. It effectively just slows down this early level play where even the best players in the world aren't making that many big blinds per 100, and just avoiding those levels altogether because there's risk involved. Obviously, it's just more beneficial. I take a lot of advantage of late reg, but I also think that if we shifted the industry to something where it's known to only be 1 level or 2 levels or 3 or whatever, that changes things drastically. But we're going in the other direction where now it's day 2 late reg.
I didn't even think about that perspective. So Jeremy, Heartland Poker Tour just played, I think you guys late regged up to level 8. Is that right? And do you do the same thing for your championship?
Yeah, we do to the beginning of level 10, which is about 6.5 hours of play. So we go pretty long in our main events. One of the biggest things that I've noticed is we used to run 20, 30, 40 single tables a day. Now we run none. I mean, at every property, even if you run them, maybe if you ran them rake free, but we used to run a ton of single tables every day. I don't know of anyone outside maybe the World Series during the summer that really runs quite a few single tables. And that's something I think that if we lower the reentry and, the period of time, that I see those taking off again. Matt, didn't you mention something recently about, is it the LAPC or the one you're currently doing now that you're trying single tables again?
Yeah, we're doing single tables in this event now. We've run probably 12 throughout the series. So that's not a lot, but it's the days that we have the most people in here. But yeah, those are the things that, are gone now because of reentry. And people don't understand, why aren't you running single tables? Okay, give me 8 other people, 9 other people, and we'll start one right now, And they're like, well, there's no one here to do that. They're all in the tournament. Of course, that's because of reentry. And so it's just another one of those things that reentry has created. I'm not proud of it. I don't think that, the fact that I started it long ago, I'm not thrilled at where it's at right now. And I know it's hurt our industry. I mean, even that first opening event, we had 1,793 players the last heat of that $1 million guarantee. Where are those players now? That's my question.
Well, to be fair, I think there are 2 things that are worth noting. One of the reasons why single table satellites died out is effectively because you're paying double rake. So you're being raked in the satellite, and then you're also being raked whenever you win your seat for the buy-in. And I think like a lot of good professional players are very sensitive to this kind of stuff. So operating rake free could potentially populate the pool, but it would probably come from the top down where they were tough to begin with. And then eventually more people started playing. As far as like how awful ReEntry has been for the industry, I agree with you probably from a long-term perspective, but I'm not so sure. If we didn't introduce it, I'm not so sure that we would have seen the sustainability of tournaments as long as we have, to the point where now I think we're hitting a small growth period again. And if they had fizzled out because we didn't have the attractive prize pools anymore, there was a lull there for a while, like 2011-ish, like Black Friday to like 13, where 10Ks weren't even getting like $500,000 the first. And then WPT kind of shifted and became 3,500 ReEntry instead. That was pivotal. People stopped playing the tour. People stopped seeing the profound nature of winning these titles. And we might be at a point now where like it would have just reduced and we would just had the series in the summer.
Great point. So Sean, hearing that, right? Hearing about the value of guarantees, hearing about these different perspectives, where does your mind go from, like, obviously you're operating more than just tournaments, right? You're operating the entire poker room. You're responsible for revenue generation. You're responsible for player retention. You're responsible for cash games and tournaments. Like, what are some of the benefits of going from unlimited ReEntry to maybe a more single, double type ReEntry, or just pure freeze out product?
That's a tough one. Honestly, it's tough to even imagine going back to a system where it's freeze out or single ReEntry. And we're talking about the right things. Like, it's, poker has always been a partnership between the casino and the players. It's not like any other part of the casino, and everybody knows that. And I remember starting back, I started at Bellagio in 2006. I mean, when we ran WPT events, and hell, Matt, I think we ran 4 a year at that point. We had a room, the Fontana Lounge, which was dedicated to satellites, single table satellites. And there were so many, we didn't even have enough staff or tables to keep up with it. It was insanity. And I understand the player's perspective of saying, well, we're getting double raked. But if we went to a rake-free satellite system, you're just talking about raising the rake of the event itself that you're getting into. It would have to. Where do those labor costs go? Labor is poker's biggest cost. It's not even close. I spend nearly 60% of every dollar that comes in on rake before I give out free drinks, comp rooms, do anything else that I keep the lights on. There's so many things. Buy new chips, buy new cards, buy Faded Spade cards. There, buddy.
You got there before I did.
There's so many different factors that people don't see. They just think it's corporate greed. And are corporations greedy? Sure, of course. They have to hit a bottom line. They have shareholders to impress and give a return on their investment too. There's a lot of factors, but people don't see those things. They go to like the tournament director guys and say, hey, how come this is the way it is? And this and that. And the TD's sitting there like, well, go talk to the director. And they come to me and I explain it to them, and it doesn't go anywhere, like I said, I think the biggest thing, if we're going to scale back from unlimited ReEntries, the biggest two arguments we have to, or the biggest two conversations we have to start talking about is how long these events last, meaning reducing the chips and reducing levels, going back to that pre-2010 days where you didn't get these monster things. And like, no one's going to be able to run a $500 like tournament in Vegas that has a $500,000 guarantee or $1 million guarantee or even more. And some of our competitors, they reach to the skies because they're doing 13, 14, 15 levels of ReEntry over 3 flights, over, a 10-day tournament, and they're hitting these big numbers and people love them. They're glamorous. They're like, oh my God, I have to go to that place and play that event. But if we're talking about going away from that, where's the money come from? People think that these casinos just create the money, but that's just not the case. The players create the money.
Okay, so let's talk about that topic, right? Because a few of you guys have brought together guarantees. So, Jeremy, I'm going to come to Matt. Berkey, I'm going to go to you, right? So, Berkey, when you're making a choice to play in your tournaments, you have limited time. You're running a business, right? You play cash. When you're making choice for a tournament, how much does guarantee play into it?
All of it. Almost all of it. I'm I'm playing bigger buy-ins. So to me, there's a huge difference between traveling for a 100-person field 10K versus, 5 diamond that's going to get 1,000 runners. Now, again, I have to be very mindful of my time. For most people, it's not going to matter. Like for most professionals, it's not going to matter because it's just about volume, and there's value in all of those events across the board. But I don't play strictly tournaments. Matter of fact, I play less tournaments than cash. And when I do, I need to be very select about the ones that I choose. And guarantees are just going to always up the value of any event that you're looking to play.
So what's interesting is since I transitioned to mid-stakes tournaments from cash games a year and a half ago, guarantees actually don't matter as much to me at the $1,500, $2,500 level, right? Now, when we go play HPT next week, $2,500 buy-in, it's awesome that there's a 700,000 guarantee, most likely more for a $2,500 buy-in. But even if it was 500,000 or 400,000, I'd probably still play in it. But again, part-time recreational player. So I think there's a huge difference in perspective between part-time rec and then obviously professional high stakes. So Savage, when you guys are working with your poker rooms, how much do these guarantee discussions come to play? And do you think it's really important if we drop down to single entry or whatnot to have these high guarantees? Or do you think it's just a wash and you got to see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, it's market-based for sure. And Los Angeles is a very tough market. We have some casinos, everybody's putting up guarantees. And the players, there's so many tournaments all year round that they won't play them unless there's a guarantee on it. So that's a real issue here. Like I said, here there's multiple flights, late reentry, add-ons, day 2 entry, this quantum where you can buy in on day 2 type of situation. So, it's very tough for us as tournament directors and people that set these or help set these guarantees to make sure that they aren't getting beat, or miss. You have to miss some, in my opinion, for it to be valuable. And we've definitely missed some here at the Commerce. So I know that we take risks and want to make it right, but the management here really got behind having no reentry this series to see how it would work out. So it's a tough situation for us when you have these markets that are so full of these all these situations. And there are some players that won't play an event because there's no reentry because they have to drive so far through traffic, things like that. So there's a lot of different factors when it comes to that.
So Jeremy, Sean's from the Las Vegas market, right? Heavily saturated. Commerce is in LA, a lot of competition. What's it like when you have these conversations with your poker room partners in markets where it's a drive-to market, maybe a fly-to market? How important are guarantees and reentry in terms of like those conversations?
Yeah, as Matt said, it's very market-based. And, when we have these conversations, this is something that I have to think about if we change the reentry would be is, let's say we have a $500 or a $700 or $800,000 guaranteed tournament. If I go to them and say, all right, we're going to do a +1, for each flight, or we do straight freeze out, their first question is going to be how is that going to affect the guarantee? Are we still going to be able to put a $7 or $1 million guarantee on a tournament? I don't know if I feel comfortable with that, and I'm missing, a guarantee that much. So if we lower a guarantee to $400,000 or $500,000, is that going to reduce? So if we reduce a guarantee to $400,000 or $500,000, our players going to say, why are you reducing it? And then we say, okay, it's just a +1 or a freeze out. Are we going to lose more players because the guarantee is lower? Or are we going to get more players that are going to travel just because it is only a +1 or a straight freeze out? So those are definitely going to be market based. So, but when we do the guarantees, it's tough to get some of the properties that we go to because every market's different. Some want the guarantees, some don't feel comfortable with it. So some of our events have guarantees, some don't. So, that's conversations that I'll have to have, with each property. I don't see them feeling comfortable. The ones that know poker a little bit more are going to be more comfortable, but the ones that don't, I see a lot of drawback. They could fight me on this, changing the style.
Berkey, $2,500 tournament, which obviously mid stakes, right? Single entry or double entry per day, 700,000 guarantee, or unlimited reentry. Both have the same $750,000 prize pool. Does that affect your decision to go play?
No, I think it's just going to be more of like where they're at. Yeah, like the inconveniences. The guarantees are the same. I'm not trying to fire max bullets. I think that ultimately the problem obviously exists, but I think it exists with good reason. People want to play, and in live poker specifically, volume is a huge issue. Mm-hmm. So if the I guess recipe to being a profitable tournament poker player, more so than anything else, is to log in massive volume as best you can, then you either need to be able to leave and go play another event immediately or re-enter in the same one over and over again. And I just wonder if we're trying to solve the wrong problem, because ultimately the way that this should align is card rooms are incentivized to ensure that the vast majority of their player pool is breaking even, and that you have outliers where some people are losing and some people are winning, but you don't ever want the winners to just scalp the entire community, and you don't want the losers to be such a small subset that if they go extinct, the entire game dies off. And tournaments don't really lend themselves that way. You just don't win very often. It gives people sour taste. So I wonder if maybe the bigger problem set is the standard that we've created with how tournaments give back money. And it wouldn't be an easy thing to change either. If we started paying 25 or 30% of the field and it was just flat the whole way, where first place is maybe now 5%, and they weren't these giant lotteries, you'd certainly lose a lot of the guys at the top. But I don't think that's a problem. I don't think it matters if I stop showing up to events. Maybe it would for WPT because it's different. They're branding something for television. They want bigger names and bigger faces. But when you're talking about mid-stake tours, even all the way up to I guess circuit events, deep stacks, something in the 3K range, I think that people just want to win, and they don't necessarily want to see Darren Elias in the middle of Jacksonville whenever they're only going to get 150 people for this event. Yeah. A local wants to win that, or somebody who is a weekend warrior or whatever the case may be.
We want the locals to win.
We
want the locals to win.
Thoughts on that, Savage? Right. So thoughts on that, Savage, in terms of Berkey makes a good point. Maybe we're not appealing to the right group, right? The high stakes group is a very small percentage of poker, right? So thoughts on what Berkey was mentioning regarding.
There's a couple different things. I'm such a huge fan of satellites and think it's such a vital part of poker itself. So I'm probably leading the charge on making sure that every place that we do World Poker Tour events, we have satellites, because I think it's important. Also payouts. I was one of the first people to start paying 1 and 8 or 12.5%, whereas before it might have been 9 and 10%. And finally got some of those people to move to pay more spots. So I agree that payouts should be flatter. 15% is what we've gone up to at the World Series of Poker. I think it's a good thing, but I don't think it's for everybody. And if you start going past that 15% level, people are going to start complaining. And, what he says is probably right. We probably should be closer to 20-25%, but I don't think that's going to draw even some of the recreational play. We just had this week a 175 buy-in, and first place was 43,900. Some players were complaining that it wasn't a big enough percentage for first, and it's just a joke. It's over 200 times your buy-in, and it's just a small little thing. And 43,000 for a lot of these guys that played this life-changing money. So, we were happy to pay out that amount. But let me say this: we do have an event coming up at the Bellagio, since we didn't talk about it, that has a $10,000 buy-in with unlimited reentry. And the event is awesome. The prize pool is $9-10 million every time. So I think there are spots in the calendar where you can have these unlimited reentry things, like Bellagio, and still have a very successful event.
Berkey, what's the most bullets you ever fired in a 10K?
I fired 6 into Bellagio 2 years ago, I think.
I know. That's why I transitioned there.
And the winner last year had 5. So I think it's profitable for some people.
I was going to say, so Berkey, when you're doing that, right, and I'm firing 2 or 3 in the lower stakes, are you looking at it from a profitability of that specific event, or are you looking at it as a profitability from your entire year and all your buy-ins?
I think you can only look at it from the entire year and all your buy-ins.
Okay.
Because obviously in that event, it decreases with every single reentry.
Yep.
There's just no getting around that. And particularly like in Bellagio where, honestly, the structure of Bellagio is so sick. Like I bagged on day 1 and then fired 5 more bullets on day 2.
God bless you. God bless you.
So it's just like, it's super slow and, it's a semi-tough field too for all things considered. Like for a 10K, it's not that tough. It's a great event, but for an event where reentry is going to last that long, the final table is going to contain a lot of really high-level pros, and you have to look at it that way too. And I think that this is where the market may be a little unattentive to the details. They'll fire a lot in an event that's relatively soft by nature, not recognizing that due to the fact that it's unlimited reentry and that the field is soft, you're almost guaranteed to land at a final table of really high skilled professionals. There are just too many in the field multiple times. So it's just too probable that they're going to get there. And I think we started to see that kind of happen at the WSOP in events like the Millionaire Maker, the Colossus. The Millionaire Maker is still limited reentry. I think you can only fire 4 times or something like that. But the final tables begin to get tougher. And this just massively crushes the amateur, the weekend warrior, whatever you want to say, their return, whether they're re-entering or not. It just drastically reduces their chance at the home run.
Right on. Great point, Berkey. We haven't talked about that yet, right? So in terms of the impact that reentry has post bubble, right? Matt, like when you're running this single entry tournament now versus the reentry tournaments at Comish, are you seeing a more recreational type player advance to the next day at a higher percentage level than in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more or less, we have just a lot of recreational local players that are here that play a lot. So, we see a lot of the same faces here. There's not a lot of pros that come out here and play these smaller series. So I don't feel like it's affecting it that much. Like I said, I think that there's a spot in each series where you could do a freeze out, 1 reentry and multiple reentry. And I do believe that, in these multiple reentries with late registration, where people are actually being able to register like close to the money, I think that's when it's really out of hand. And I do think that, even at Bellagio, you're not like right next to the money when you can still late reg. So I think that still leaves some room, but I understand why these guys are firing multiple times there, because the value in the event, I think, is still really high. I do feel like, there are enough players that play there, even at the $10,000 level, where the field is still good enough to still keep firing those bullets.
Tom, I'm going to hop in here. Everybody keeps using Bellagio as an example, and we know the one player that constantly complains about Bellagio and the reentry, and I'm not going to mention his name because I'm not going to plug him. So, I worked there for, almost 10 years, and 5 Diamond is definitely something special. It can't be compared to any other event in the world, I believe. It's the end of the year, not the WPT year, but the physical calendar year. It's right before Christmas. It's right before the holidays. Everybody shows up. I dare anybody to go back to 2001 when they started this event and just look at all the winners. They're insane. The list of winners before reentry, after reentry, it doesn't matter. Everybody who's anybody is showing up. So that field automatically is just super insane. I mean, Doyle's won that event. Gus has won that event, I believe, multiple times. Antonio's won that event multiple times. The list goes on and on. It's a plethora of who's who in poker for that event. And it is a one-of-a-kind special event. I've even told Savage and some other people at the World Poker Tour, I think that should be their premier event. You know what I mean? I've pushed that enough times, but it's insane. And the toughest thing everybody's going to have right now is everybody's like, oh my God. Well, I won't say everybody, but some people are saying if it went to freeze out or single reentry, that the entries would actually go up. And I posted, would be a little, biased because I work for the same company, but our numbers at Bellagio in the last 8 years, and it's just straight up. All it will take is one time for us to change the format And that entry level dip, and I'm not talking like last year, I think would you guys get 1,001? Was that the exact
1,001.
I'm not talking like if it goes to like 925 year, that's just a little bit of variance. That variance is there, but I'm talking if you do it and it goes to like 700, there are going to be questions from people we don't want to have questions. I'm talking CFOs, VPs, presidents, people that really don't know poker that look to people like Craig and I to be the foremost authority of poker, which is the case in most card rooms. Most VPs, most card room directors and managers report to either like a table games VP or some type of like marketing or like the president of the company who has no clue, has never worked a day in poker. So we're the foremost authority, and we have to tell them this is what's this. But if you show it on a sheet that says we had this number and this was our rake and we decided to change the format, it will look bad. So we need to figure that out prior to making these changes, prior to making these big leaps. Just like Jeremy said, it's going to be hard to go to these people and say, hey, I have an idea because this is what the poker community wants. But just because it's what they want, is it what the casino wants? Is it what's going to draw people in? And it's a risk. And I'm not saying we're not willing to take risks. We take risks all the time with guarantees, with changing structures. I believe Bellagio was day 3 reentry up until last year, but you changed the time. So it's kind of like it was similar but different. So there's a lot of risk involved with doing these changes. And a lot of us, especially in ops, are very skeptical because we have to do year-over-year analysis, especially for a tournament like Five Diamond, which is the end of your year. So it's not like it's an event in February where you can go, if we take a little bit of a risk, we still have 10 months to figure this out and to maybe add an event and do something to get those numbers where it needs to be. No, we're at the end of the year, and holy shit, if we bomb this, it's going to look really, really bad. So
here's the thing from the community standpoint is it's not a good faith argument because they're not coming from a business perspective. And I don't think anyone cares about the numbers. Ultimately, Five Diamond is one of the worst player experiences of the year, simply because the space is limited. You're forced to wait in lines. You're forced to wait to take a seat. There's so much that goes on that isn't in line with any other event that you're going to play throughout the course of the year. But we all keep showing up. We keep showing up with fistfuls of money, throwing it at this event, trying to win it because first place continually gets bigger. The prize pool continually swells, and all we care about is value. So everybody who's saying like, make it single reentry, they want a seat. They just want a seat sooner, right? Everybody who's saying that, sorry, go ahead, Savage.
Yeah. So last year we made some changes. We felt helped that a lot. And I believe that even this year is going to be even better. But last year, we did the 8 1-hour levels on day 1, and we basically had no waiting. So those are problems I believe that are in the past. So I hope that that's not an issue anymore. The staff is much better. The registration lines are way better. So I think those things have made some changes. So I just wanted to throw that in there that Bellagio has thought of that. They added all those tables into the sports book. So I believe that, those kind of things have taken away. But yes.
And I honestly think that I would imagine that people will get a little more quiet about the reentry discussion because first of all, like Negreanu was the biggest proponent of just firing off and telling everybody that he was trying to buy a stack. And it never worked because that's not really a strategy. It's just a good way to light money on fire. And I think the community's smart enough to understand that now. So sure, it sucks that the top 10% of players are going to be there whenever reentry closes. And because of that, there's going to be more concentration of them as the event goes on. But if we also look back, it's not like high rollers are winning these things. It's the guys that are kind of capping out at 10K. And I just wonder if it's much to do about nothing, particularly with this event, because it does draw so much attention.
Got it. I'm going to do a quick little summary of just some things that we're talking about, right? So I think what we're all kind of coming to in our minds is that it's much more than just a topic of reentry, right? We've got to think about other topics like guarantees, like the reduction of level times, the reduction of chip stacks, the number of levels in late entry. So I feel like you guys are right. There's so many more things that we have to discuss about this. We're not going to get it, all on this podcast, probably other roundtables that we'll have. But I want to go back to a business question now, because we haven't talked about it and I don't know the answer. But where does profitability come into play? Where does profitability come into play for a poker room? Are we looking at that at all in terms of buy-ins, numbers, reentry versus non-reentry? How does profitability factor in at all?
Oh, of course, profitability is a huge topic. With my bosses and stuff, of course, I have goals and numbers that I have to achieve. And in a perfect world, I'll be honest, in a perfect world, I've talked about this many times. I would love to go to all freeze outs. The problem is when I got into poker, it was about 50% of the field went from tournaments to cash. We had nothing to worry about. Or they went from tournaments to the satellite for the next event. We had nothing to worry about. Now, and at Aria, I'll be honest, our retention of tournament players that go to cash is higher than most. So we're lucky in that regard, but it's still nowhere near the numbers I just gave you. I mean, if we hold 15% of the field in a regular daily that go to cash, that's a great day. That's a great day. And I'm telling you, it's far less than that. Like players, especially in the Vegas market, want to go to the next tournament. Oh, you don't have anything for me. Well, yeah, I have 1-3, I have 2-5, I have all these cash games. A guy like Berkey, we love a guy like Berkey, but he is the exception, nowhere near the rule. Berkey will go play in the Poker Go studio or one of the high rollers upstairs, and then he'll go on table one and hop in a game after he wins the event. Yeah, I've given you credit for winning. So, how do we get back to that point? I honestly don't think we can. And my greatest example is everybody wants 2006 formats for tournaments with 2019 chip stacks, guarantees, level lengths, all that stuff. People aren't willing to go all the way back. We'd love it. We'd love it. Because I'll tell you, even in the Vegas market, if I lost you, that means I'm gaining someone else that's coming in for something else. It would shuffle, but that's not what's happening. Once they walk out the door, I'm not gaining someone else. I'm just losing them for the day because they busted out and went to a different event. So what's the middle ground? That's the question. What's the middle ground? And I agree with Berkey. It's not all about just reentry versus freeze out. It has to do with like levels, maybe percentage of people we pay. There are a lot of other things involved here that people aren't really talking about. They're just saying corporate greed. And I'm like, yeah, we're not making a boatload in poker. Honestly, most poker rooms can make, and I'm talking like resort casinos, will make in 365 days what the pit can make in one. That's not a joke in one. So most people are like, why do places even have card rooms? And I'm like, my answer to that is, when I moved to Vegas, there were 78 card rooms. There are less than 30 now. So we're making less, but it is, and in most places, not Bellagio, not some of our competitors, not Aria, but in a lot of places, poker is an amenity. It is there. It's no different than the spa or something else. What they don't want you to do is go to a floor man or a pit boss or anybody and say, do you have a poker room? And they go, no. Because guess what? Now you've left the casino. And for every person, especially in the Vegas market, that walks through your door, that is a dollar sign above your head. You know what I mean? So in most places, it's okay to break even. There's a lot of factors when you're talking about poker and profitability. Some people are willing to keep it as a break even. And then there's high pressure rooms, like I said, like Bellagio and Aria, where every day our CFO's like, I proved this, but I think you're over on this and this and this and that. And it's just a different ball game that people don't get. And I'm willing to discuss it. And I'm even willing to meet in the middle somewhere, but it can't be 2006 freeze out with 2019, everything we've gained. Matt knocks himself and he's like about reentry sometimes, but honestly, there have been a lot of great things that have come with reentry. Can people go back to that old style of play? I don't think so. So how do we figure it out? How do we do that? And I think single reentry is the next step, or double reentry or whatever. People are always afraid of 6-7 bullets in the ground. Those are the outliers. Those are the guys Like that doesn't happen as often as people think. I know even for like an event like WPT 500, that event is built to re-enter. It really is. It's built to get this huge chip stack, re-enter, and hope to spin it up and do what you do. There's not a lot of people buying into that event 6-7 times. And there's 9-10 flights. It doesn't happen. I've pulled the reports. So I think people think it's more egregious than it is. And then you have events like 5 Diamond where it does happen, for sure. So there's a lot to talk about.
Great explanation, man. I know I put everybody on the spot with the profitability question, but I think that's probably one of those things where, depending on poker room, you either look at it from a tournament perspective or an overall poker room perspective or an overall casino perspective. So what I want to do here, I know we only have about 20, 30 minutes left, but I want to do a couple quick, like around the horn type exercises with these 4 categories. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Just ask for your feedback real quick, whatever comes to mind. No answer is wrong or right, just for perspective. So Savage, I'll start with you. Assuming 45, 60-minute levels, what's the right amount of registration levels?
Okay, I don't ever do 45-minute levels because I think they're dumb.
Oh, Jeremy, we're going to have a fist fight.
I don't do any 45s. No, we do 40s. 40s and
40
60s.
minutes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, 40, 60. Okay,
40
go ahead,
and 60,
Savage.
yes. So yeah, to me, I think the registration should be open like 4.5 hours, including breaks. That's what we do here for most of our events. But when we get to our main event, they're still also open only for 4.5 hours. I know with the World Poker Tour, I work with a lot of them. We do 10 levels. So 10 levels is our number that we have registration open for. And I think that works for us because, you're starting with 40,000 in chips. You still get in at 26.66 big blinds when you're at that 10 level. So I like to back it back to, if you can come in with 25 big blinds, that's how long I like to see registration open as a maximum.
Jeremy?
That's roughly what we do. We do in the side events, we do anywhere between 2 and 3.5 hours, just depending on the buy-in, how many chips. If I do a deeper stack, we might do 1 or 2 more extra levels. Our main events, we do 9 levels, so they're getting 6.5, 7 hours of registration. And yeah, we do see those players that jump in at the last minute. I think what it is we see those players jumping at the last minute because they have 1 bullet left and they know it, and they don't want to rebuy, they don't want to re-enter in level 5, 6 because they feel their chances are better, or they have 1 bullet left. We do 30K in chips in the main event, so we start at 100. So we do see a lot of players buying it at that last minute.
Okay.
So
Berkey?
I would say much shorter. It's not really about time. It's about chip stack, like Savage mentioned. I'd like to see registration close somewhere around 50 big blinds. I think it's critical to force people to play multiple strategies throughout an event. And I also think this is a big reason why we don't see the spillover to cash. They're 2 different animals, and quite frankly, cash is intimidating and difficult for tournament players who have just kind of fundamentally worked out short stack strategy.
Got it. Sean?
Can I phone TD Paul Campbell real quick? I'm not a tournament guy. No, we run events that I think our high rollers, I think it's 16.6 bigs you can come in with at the final. And then we have other events that are like 25, 30 bigs.
Personal preference on the spot.
Personal preference. I like to late as possible as a player. That's because I self-admittedly, my game is weak at other times. I come in with 100 bigs and I play too many hands. I need to go to South Hawaii. I'm going to be honest. My tournament game is pretty whack right now.
Yeah.
But again, but that lends itself to be that I'm actually a better cash game player. I know how to, which is the opposite of what Berkey just said, which is funny, but I've always been a cash game player and never really, I just dabble in tournaments for fun. So just personal preference, it doesn't change for me. I myself, as a recreational player, am never going to look at a structure sheet and say, oh, I get this many bigs, I'm going to go play or not. I choose where to play based on if the event is fun, if the people are fun. I play events in the Midwest. I play events at Commerce. I don't really play in Vegas only because I live here and it's not really as fun for me. So as a complete recreational tournament player, it really matters less of what I'm getting as for value in the tournament and more for what's around. Like, honestly, I travel like weird places just for fun.
Got it. I'm with Berkey. I like 40 to 50 big blinds. I like kind of the 40 big blind number. But again, that's being more part-time professionally in the tournament scene now than in the past. But I don't like it when it's 15, 20 big blinds and folks are just coming in, shoving with a certain range. To me, that takes some of the strategy out of poker. But at the same time, depending on what zone you're in, Matt, you got the right range to call. So you never know. Okay, got it.
Hey, Tom, real quick, though, can I be honest? That happens in cash games, too.
Yeah.
There are players that have complaints about that. Blaj and Aria, we have a 10-20 no-limit game that you could buy in for $800. And I'll tell you, every single person who buys in from 4 to 10K, which is pretty average, hates that guy. They look at him like, because they know what they're going to do. They know they're playing scared poker, just trying to spin up a stack, try to double, triple up, and they're going to leave. That happens all the time. So what's the correct answer there? And that's a whole different conversation.
I think that's a whole other conversation. It's crazy that minimum buy-ins haven't evolved since 2002.
Oh, man.
I totally agree. And I actually have talked about how in 2019, we still have 1-3 no limit. Should that even exist anymore? The value of the dollar has gone up to the point where it's almost an unsustainable game. It's the best for the casino and it's the best for the recreational player for sure. And that's why, you look at rooms and it's like 15 1-3 games, 5-2-5 games, and then it's very limited because money is tighter going up, of course. But like we're at a point now where how many winning 1-3 players are there? Well, you can probably count them on two hands in the whole country. It's crazy because you're fighting the rake, you're fighting the tip, and the variance in those games are generally a lot higher because you're going 5-6 handed to the flop and stuff like that. It's hard to protect your stacks. There's caps on buy-ins and stuff. There's so many factors, but that lends it kind of what we're talking about where guys want to come in for 20 bigs. I know a lot of players, and I'm Berkey, I know you know these players too, who even play our high rollers, successful players. They fire their first bullet on time because we offer rake free on time. And then if they bust, they wait all the way. Then we start our events at 2. They wait all the way to 7:15 for that break and then buy in for 20 bigs.
But it makes a lot of sense in those arenas because edges are incredibly small and strategies are relatively simple at shallow stacks. So even if they're pushing a neutral edge at that point, because they're selling action at markup or whatever the case may be, they're still realizing their ROI.
Yeah,
and it makes there's just no profit. There's no necessary profit playing against 6 or 7 other top tier pros throughout the course of that event, because since it's during the re-entry period, all of the amateurs are still going to be in the event. None of them are going to fire once and quit.
Good points. And hey, I think we got our next topic for the next Faded Spade Podcast Roundtable. We'll talk about cash games. I'm trying to get something together to talk about private games, but that seems to be a sensitive subject all around. But that's going to happen. It will happen, Sean. All right. So
reserve games, damn it. Reserve games.
Sorry. All right, let's go around the horn one more time. Matt Savage, what is your ideal payout percentage for tournaments?
I like it like we do with the World Poker Tour, and as we do on all of the events that I run, it's 1 and 8, about 12.5%. And the key there is that 9th place is 10% of first.
Okay, Jeremy.
Yeah, we do roughly 10 to 12% right now, and a few years back it was just a strict 10%. Kind of raised it to that 12, and just seems like a lot of the players, as mentioned, there's a lot of rec players that play, in the Midwest. I'd say probably 70 to 80% of our players, are from that area of the market. But those players have really kind of stressed concern about raising it to that, 13, 14, 15% of the field. So that's something definitely to think about for the future.
Berkey.
So I'm going to give kind of a unique answer. I think it should be dynamic. And what I mean by that is I think that we should cap first place at like 250 buy-ins, something of that nature. And anytime that number, so anytime 10% of the prize pool is more than 250 buy-ins, I think that it should just start to fill out more places at the bottom. So we should just start paying, giving the money back to everything beyond, say, 12.5% of the field, like Savage is suggesting.
Wow. Thoughts on that, Matt?
That only happens in literally there's 10 events a year, 20 events a year that do that. Basically, I don't think there's many more than that.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of these like multi-festival. Yeah, I mean, it would mostly apply to the World Series.
Yeah.
The main event, the Colossus, all these big events. But it is a good way to allow for unlimited reentry. And obviously, I'm pulling 250 out of a hat. It could be 100. You know, it's all very significant.
Sure.
It's a great idea. All right, Poker Boss.
100% payout after we take our break. Was that the wrong answer?
I don't know.
I actually was going to lead off with saying I think it's dynamic in a different way, that not like, you know, I keep talking about it's not one size fits all for every tournament. I think buy-in and experience and, you know, high rollers versus mid stakes versus low stakes, I think they're all shifted in a different way. But I love this idea that Berkey just brought up. I mean, we're going to talk about this more, buddy, off air. You know, where you maybe cap first place and then trickle it down from there. That's actually kind of brilliant. But you know, I would say as a rec player that somewhere between 15%. Most of our events are 12 to 15% at ARIA. I don't mind going as much as 18. I think that's getting dangerously close to where it's just like you flattened it too much. Because here's the deal: when you win a tournament, you want that wow factor. And again, I bring up Five Diamond a lot because a lot of people do. When people say that Five Diamond is too top heavy, I say yes, but this is like one of the events of the year. When you win this, you want to win something big. I don't want Five Diamond player to win $1 million, $1.1 million. I want them to win 1.92 million, if possible, based on how many players. If you get 1,000 players and you're not north of like 1.8 million, something's wrong with the payout structure in my mind. That's just me. But there are other events where, you know, I don't think it's that necessary to be top heavy. Actually, I would say the majority of them shouldn't be top heavy. There should be some instances where they are very top heavy. I don't know. I haven't really looked at the World Series main event payout structure, how it works. I think they pretty much cap first place and then work down. If I'm not wrong, someone correct me if I'm wrong here. Because they always like, you know, when it was 1 year, it was 10 million and then it was 8 million. So it always seems like it's capped at a certain percentage or a certain dollar amount to look really sexy for TV. And there are events like Five Diamond, the World Series Poker main event, that want to look sexy for TV. Like, I went to Vegas. I won $2 million. I won a Hublot watch. I won an Audi or whatever people are giving out these days. And, you know, just like Player of the Year for the World Series, they give out big prizes, right? Nobody? Anybody?
I was like, oh boy. I was in my mind. I was thinking about like what to do next for Around the Horn. And then you brought that up and I went, oh, he went there.
I thought you were going to hit me with the mute button right there for sure.
But let me throw a shout out to Faded Spade Partners World Poker Tour, the preferred playing cards of the WPT and HPT, who actually give out incentives for their Player of the Year race. Matt, perfect world. Are the majority of tournaments unlimited reentry, single reentry, freeze outs, or a different setup?
I believe, you know, hopefully we'll fall into that single reentry level, even for main events. The LAPC main event will never be reentry. It's just 10,000 freeze out, and we'd like to keep it that way. But, you know, I think there's room for any series to have multiple, single, and no reentry freeze out tournaments. So that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see a wide range, and I think that we have that on the World Poker Tour. I'm glad that we do. And I think our partners are happy with the setup of the way they run their events. And if they're happy, we're happy at the World Poker Tour. So I think that's where I'd like to fall. And, you know, I'm again, the late registration, I think, is a bigger issue for us right now. And hopefully we figure that out as well.
Got it. Jeremy.
Yeah, you know, I agree as well. I like the whole range because I think some players are going to like the reentry. Some players don't. Some players might like the +1. So adding that, you know, different variation to a whole structure, just like I'm a big fan of any structure shouldn't be, or any series shouldn't be all no limit hold'em. You know, put some pot limit Omaha, some, you know, mixed games in there too. And, you know, just to have variation for all those players that like specific, or if they like the reentry or they don't, having a couple of each one, I think will work best in the future.
Now, Jeremy, you mentioned most of your tournaments are unlimited reentry, but your championship coming up in St. Louis, the weekend of the 21st of November, is +1.
+1.
Is there a reason why?
Well, we do the +1. So one of the first, and I think this might have even stemmed off of Savage's idea. So one of the first championships events we did a few years back was at Thunder Valley. And, Ben and I had a big discussion about, do we do +1? Do we do, unlimited reentry? And I think the best concept was that +1, because we have 3 flights. So we do a Friday, Saturday, Sunday flight, day 2 on Monday. So we do +1 for each flight. And the thought process was someone could still be in for $15K, if they fire 1, reentry for each flight. So we felt that was the best playing field. So we do 8 levels of reentry. So we start with our levels from the very beginning in that one. So we'll do 8 levels of reentry and then +1 for each flight. So
cool. I
think that works best.
And Berkey, unlimited, single, freeze out, or does it matter for you from a player perspective?
So I think that it's something where if stops are running like full festivals or series, I would prefer single reentry or no reentry. I think that there's enough options then to kind of run an organic system where you have feeder satellites, and basically there's always something to play. If it's a one-off event or a very special event, then I'm all for the unlimited reentries.
Good points. Sean, poker boss.
In a perfect world, freeze outs for everything.
Got it.
We don't live in a perfect world, and I'm probably one of the only operators that will come live or say it on social or anything that freeze outs is the way to go. I think I don't think it's needed for the growth of the game. I think there's a lot of factors, but in the world that we live in now, post reentry day, I think 1 or 2 bullets would be perfect. But again, just like Berkey just alluded to, it's not one size fits all. So sometimes you're in a place that's just doing a one-off big event, and sometimes you're in a place that does this massive festival, like the World Series, where if you bust out of the 12 p.m. tournament, you have a 3, a 5, a 7, a yada, 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 so on and so forth. And to be honest, location has a lot to do with the World Series success, because how many people want to leave the Rio once they're in it? Everybody complains about it, but honestly, you're not walking. Getting an Uber or Lyft is not the easiest thing in the world. Getting a cab is not the easiest thing. And then you have to look at other schedules and stuff like that. So it's a different animal. And I think when we have this true next conversation about what are our next steps, I think the World Series kind of needs to be left out of it, because they're always going to be successful. People bracelet hunt. You know what I mean? That's obviously a huge thing. So we kind of have to leave them out. We actually have to leave summer in Las Vegas out. Whether it's Bellagio, Aria, one of our competitors, Venetian, Wynn, who all do a fantastic job in the summer. But how do you miss? Like the dartboard is so huge, Las Vegas summer, everybody's here. I could throw any event I want, and I'm going to knock it out of the park. So I think we take Las Vegas summer, throw it out, and look at everything else as a whole, domestically, internationally. There's a lot of other factors and such. I just that's
got it. Oh no, not your sheet with the marker. Oh God, get out of here. We're wrapping up. He does this every podcast. All right. My take, give me a freeze out, give me single entry, or give me single entry each day if there's 2 or 3 starting flights. That's kind of like my take. So all right. So as we round this thing out, I want to put you guys probably not on the spot, because you guys are all professionals and I know you have these thoughts in your head, but I'll go back around the horn. Why don't you wrap this up in terms of what your ultimate message to the industry is from your perspective about this topic of reentry? What would maybe be your middle ground? And then if you'd like to promote anything coming up for any of your organizations, feel free to do it. So Savage, we'll start with you.
For me, I would just like to say, we respect the opinions of the players, and I am happy that we've got such a good response in this series. Numbers are actually up or close to what they were last year with reentry. So I'm happy that people have responded and given me feedback and say that they like it. There are a few who say they don't like it, but I'll leave you with a story that happened just yesterday. We had a 12 and a 4 o'clock flight with no reentry. You couldn't enter into the same flight again. The guy said, I didn't really like it because once I busted out of the first one early, I had to go downstairs and play cash for 3 hours before coming back up for the 4 o'clock session. And I said, well, I can't really argue with that because that's actually the total point of having no reentry is bringing people in for cash games. And I want to thank you for playing the cash games, and it worked out well.
There you go, Matt. All right. And any upcoming World Poker Tour or Commerce or Bay 101 tournaments you want to talk through?
Yeah, definitely coming up. Going from here, I'll be going up to Thunder Valley for a Deep Stacks event, and then heading to Seminole Hard Rock for the WPT event down there, which is always huge, and then out to Bellagio in December before Christmas. So hope all you guys have a good holiday season and play some poker on the World Poker Tour.
There you go. And man, kudos to you for taking, that risk, at the Commerce and trying to turn it upside down a little bit. You've always done that in the industry, and kudos to you for actually moving forward and talking the talk, not, and walking the walk, not just talking the talk, man.
Thanks, Tom.
Jeremy.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be obviously a learning curve. I'm a very, player friendly when we try to, do the structures, but you can only do so much. There's one stop we go to at the Ameristar in East Chicago. They don't have a poker room. So I have to structure it as we're just in a big ballroom there. And it's in a big market. So it's some of our largest events. We'll get 1,100 players in the first event. So it's like I have to structure some of that to market specific. But other places, if we do the +1 or just freeze outs, like, Matt said, the cash game business should go up. And those are going to be numbers we'll have to look at, if we limit those reentries. So should be exciting times. Like, Tom, as you mentioned, we have the $2,500 championship event that's at the Hollywood Casino in St. Louis. So that'll be a good time. We live stream the final table and then televise it later for TV as well. So good luck in that. Tom, I know you're looking forward to that.
I will be there. I'll be there with a couple bullets and also another U-Stake campaign. So hopefully more ROI for our U-Stake backers. Berkey, all right, man. Final thoughts on this and anything you'd like to talk about regarding Solve for Why poker training?
I guess my final thoughts are just that, like, as far as unlimited reentry goes, I think it functions best at the extremes. So when you're talking about entry level buy-ins where people are just trying to get a lot of exposure, where they can get a massive return on a small investment, I think that tends to be good for beginners. It gets them hooked. It gives them a chance to last a little bit longer, I guess. And then at the top end with the high roller circuit, it's such a small pool. Let them do what they want. They should police themselves. If ultimately the 50 or 100 of them that are routinely playing decide that unlimited reentry is very bad for the ecosystem, it'll change because they have that kind of pool.
Got it. All right. Poker Boss, final thoughts.
I would say that I think most poker players are capitalists at heart. It lends itself to be that way. They're mostly working for themselves. So, let the market drive itself. There's two things we look at in poker rooms that kind of steer us in the right direction. First thing is feedback. Obviously, I appreciate every single bit of feedback, and I try to answer every single person that respectfully opens a conversation. I'll respectfully return the conversation. And I've been saying this forever. Vote with your dollars. You think just vote with your dollars. Like if you buy into a tournament and this year it's 200 and next year it's 125, we go back to the drawing board. Do you think we're just like, oh, okay, we'll see what we do next year? No, we have to account for that. So if you like freeze outs, push those events. I know there's not many of them anymore, but if you like single reentry, push those events. The market will be driven by not only the size of the tournaments, but what the casino brings to the bottom line. So and that's every part of the casino. That's not just poker, and that's every business in the world. You have to reassess when your numbers dip and drop and stuff like that. So we look at all that, and the feedback is appreciated. Upcoming things at Aria, we're kind of capping it off right now with Poker Masters. And that's kind of our last event of the year. We have some special things that I can't even talk about yet coming up next year. I kind of talked to you a little bit about that off air, Tom. So I know you're kind of excited to if this comes to fruition. So we have some cool things coming up. Come out for Bellagio 5 Diamond. Come say hi to Matt. I'm sure he'll buy you a drink. And everybody watching this, he'll buy everybody a drink. So, I'll be there, and I'll buy one drink for one person. So,
just go see Matt and say promo code curtains for your free drink. Oh my God, those things. All right, my final thoughts. Look, I can't say anything any better than any of you guys did on this topic. So I just want to thank you guys for joining. The one thing I will say is that Faded Spade, we are increasing our product offering to the community. So next year you will see the first ever Faded Spade Freeze Out tournament, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, as a way to expand our brand and create deeper connections with the poker industry. So be on the lookout for that. Savage, Jeremy, Sean, Berkey, I want to thank you guys for taking time to do this. You guys know the purpose of this is to actually spawn real conversation, with you guys having this and the visibility it will get in the industry, to continue that conversation, to take what we're talking about, some of the older ideas, newer ideas, and maybe massage it in a way where more organizations can do what's best for themselves and the players and the industries and the industry at large. So thank you guys for being a part of the Faded Spade podcast. I really appreciate it. And that's a wrap. We will see you next time on the Faded Spade podcast. Be sure to check it out on YouTube, our brand new Faded Spade YouTube channel in VOD form and all major podcast outlets across Google, Spotify, Apple, you name it. For Matt Savage, Jeremy Smith, the Poker Boss Sean McCormack, and Matt Berkey, I'm Tom Wheaton. Have a great day and good luck at the tables.
The Faded Spade Podcast is sponsored by Duck Productions. Contact them for all of your podcast editing needs at randy@duckduckpro.com.
Upgrade to Faded Spade and get 15% off the new face of cards with code PODCAST at fadedspade.com.